Welcome to another spine-tingling episode of True Horror Stories, where tonight we delve into a particularly unsettling tale that comes to us from the darkest corners of Reddit's NoSleep community. This story was shared by a user named Dark Night Watcher, who claims that every detail of this account is absolutely true. Though we cannot verify all aspects of this chilling narrative, the vivid descriptions and emotional rawness suggest an experience that left deep psychological scars on the person who lived through it. Before we begin, I recommend you turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for what might be one of the most disturbing true stories of being alone at night that we've ever featured on this channel. Our story begins with Sarah, a 28-year-old graphic designer who had recently moved into a charming 2-bedroom cottage on the outskirts of a small New England town. The house, nestled at the end of a winding country road, was surrounded by dense woods that created a natural barrier between Sarah and her nearest neighbors, who lived about half a mile away. Sarah had always been somewhat of a loner and cherished her privacy, which is why the isolated location appealed to her so much. She had moved there following a difficult breakup, seeking solace in the quiet countryside, where she could focus on her freelance work and personal healing away from the chaos of city life. The cottage itself was over 100 years old, but had been renovated about a decade earlier, giving it modern amenities while preserving its rustic charm with exposed wooden beams, original hardwood floors, and a stone fireplace that dominated the living room. Sarah had been living in the cottage for about 3 months without incident. Quickly settling into a comfortable routine, she would work during the day, often taking breaks to walk through the surrounding woods or sit on her back porch with a cup of tea, admiring the natural beauty that enveloped her new home. In the evenings, she would cook dinner, maybe watch some Netflix, and then usually head to bed around 11. It was a simple life, but it brought her peace after the emotional turbulence of the past year. On this particular night, however, Sarah had stayed up later than usual to finish a project for an important client. The deadline was the following morning, and she wanted to make sure everything was perfect before submission. It was nearly 2 in the morning when she finally saved her work, shut down her computer, and stretched her tired muscles, ready for a well-deserved rest. The house was completely silent, except for the occasional creaking of the old wooden structure, which Sarah had grown accustomed to over the past months. As she went through her nightly routine in the bathroom, brushing her teeth and washing her face, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something felt different about the house tonight. There was a heaviness to the air, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that she couldn't quite put her finger on. She dismissed it as fatigue, knowing that working until the early hours often left her mind playing tricks on her. After finishing in the bathroom, she walked down the hallway toward her bedroom, noticing how the shadows seemed deeper tonight, the darkness more intense. Despite the soft glow of the nightlight, she kept plugged in near the stairs. Sarah had never considered herself particularly afraid of the dark, but living alone in such an isolated location had made her more cautious, more aware of her vulnerability. She stepped into her bedroom and closed the door behind her, not bothering to lock it since she lived alone. The room was cool and inviting, with moonlight filtering through the thin curtains that covered the window overlooking the backyard and woods beyond. Sarah changed into her pajamas a simple oversized t-shirt and cotton shorts, before slipping under the covers of her queen-sized bed. As she reached to turn off the bedside lamp, she froze, her hand hovering over the switch as she caught a sound that seemed out of place. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but distinctly there, a soft scratching noise that appeared to be coming from somewhere outside her bedroom window. Sarah held her breath, straining to listen more carefully, wondering if perhaps it was just a tree branch scraping against the side of the house. In the light breeze, the sound came again, more deliberate this time, like fingernails dragging slowly across the glass, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. Sarah sat up in bed, her heart beginning to pound a little faster as she stared at the window. The curtains prevented her from seeing clearly outside, but she could detect no movement, no silhouette or shadow that might indicate someone was there. "It's probably just a raccoon or something," she whispered to herself, trying to rationalize the sound. Wildlife was abundant in the area, and she had often seen raccoons, opossums, and even the occasional fox roaming around her property at night. Still, something about this particular sound felt different, less animal and more intentional. Sarah debated whether to get up and check, or simply ignore it and try to sleep. After a moment's hesitation, she decided to investigate, swinging her legs over the side of the bed and approaching the window cautiously, telling herself that confirming it was just an animal would put her mind at ease. She reached for the curtain with trembling fingers, drawing it back slowly to reveal the darkness beyond. The moon had disappeared behind a cloud, leaving the backyard shrouded in almost complete darkness. Sarah pressed her face closer to the glass, squinting as she tried to penetrate the gloom. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the familiar outline of her back porch and the edge of the woods beyond. But as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, a chill ran through her entire body, freezing her in place. There, at the tree line, about 30 yards from her window, stood a figure. It was difficult to make out details in the darkness, but Sarah could clearly distinguish the silhouette of what appeared to be a person, standing perfectly still, facing directly toward her house, toward her window. Sarah instinctively stepped back, letting the curtain fall back into place, her mind racing with possibilities. It could be a neighbor, she reasoned, though that made little sense given the late hour and the distance to the nearest house. It could be someone who got lost in the woods, though why they would be standing motionless at the edge of her property rather than approaching the house for help was beyond explanation. Or it could be someone with malicious intent, watching her home, watching her. The thought sent another wave of fear through Sarah's body as she realized just how vulnerable she was out here, alone, with no immediate help available. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, wondering if she should call the police, but hesitated. What would she tell them? That she saw a figure in the woods? They would hardly consider that an emergency, and by the time they arrived, if they came at all, whoever or whatever was out there would likely be gone. Sarah decided to double-check all the locks in the house instead, a task she had already completed as part of her nightly routine, but felt compelled to verify again. Grabbing her phone as a makeshift flashlight, she moved cautiously out of her bedroom and down the hallway, checking each window she passed to ensure it was securely locked. She descended the stairs slowly, wincing at every creak of the old wooden steps, irrationally afraid that the noise might somehow alert the figure outside to her movements. The living room was cast in shadows, the familiar furniture transformed into ominous silhouettes by the darkness. Sarah moved methodically through the space, checking the front door first, confirming that both the doorknob lock and deadbolt were engaged, then moving to each window, tugging gently on the frames to verify they were secure. She was just about to check the back door when a sound from the kitchen made her freeze. It was a soft thud, like something being set down on the countertop, followed by what sounded unmistakably like a drawer being opened and closed. Sarah's blood ran cold as she stood paralyzed in the middle of her living room, straining to listen. There was no mistaking it. The sounds were coming from inside her house, from her kitchen, just around the corner from where she stood. A rush of adrenaline surged through her body as the realization hit her. Someone was in her home. The figure she had seen outside couldn't have been the source of these sounds, unless there was more than one person, or unless they had somehow gained entry to her house in the brief time it had taken her to come downstairs. Sarah's mind raced through her options. The front door was only a few steps away. She could make a run for it, but what if the intruder heard her and intercepted her before she could get out? Her car keys were in a dish by the door, but her car was parked outside, and the idea of running through the darkness to reach it, knowing someone might be watching from the woods, was terrifying. She could call 911, but speaking would alert the intruder to her presence, and the police station was at least 20 minutes away. As these thoughts tumbled through her mind, Sarah heard another sound from the kitchen, closer this time, like footsteps moving across the tile floor, heading in her direction. With no time left to deliberate, Sarah made a split-second decision, ducking behind the large armchair in the corner of the living room, making herself as small as possible as she fumbled with her phone, her trembling fingers navigating to the emergency call screen. With bated breath, Sarah crouched in her hiding spot, phone clutched tightly in her hand as she listened to the footsteps drawing nearer. They were slow, deliberate, as if whoever was in her house was in no hurry, was taking their time to explore each room thoroughly. The thought was somehow more terrifying than if they had been moving quickly, frantically. This calculated, unhurried movement suggested confidence, suggested that the intruder felt completely at ease invading her home in the middle of the night. Sarah's finger hovered over the call button on her phone, but she hesitated, afraid that even the slightest sound would give away her position. Instead, she quickly turned the volume all the way down and the brightness of her screen to its lowest setting, hoping to minimize any chance of detection. The footsteps paused at the threshold between the kitchen and living room, and Sarah held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly in her chest that she was certain it must be audible across the room. She couldn't see the intruder from her position, but she could feel their presence, a disturbance in the air, a weight that pressed down on the atmosphere of the room. For what felt like an eternity, there was complete silence, not even the sound of breathing beyond her own shallow, controlled attempts to remain quiet. Then, just as Sarah began to wonder if she had imagined the whole thing, a voice spoke, so soft and close that it might have been a whisper, directly into her ears. "I know you're in here, Sarah," the voice said, somehow both gentle and menacing at the same time. "I've been watching you for weeks. The sound of her name spoken by this unknown intruder sent a jolt of terror through Sarah's body, so intense that she nearly cried out. How did they know her name? What did they mean they had been watching her for weeks? The implications were horrifying, suggesting a level of stalking and surveillance that went beyond a random break-in. This person, whoever they were, had specifically targeted her, had studied her, perhaps had even been inside her home before, without her knowledge. The footsteps resumed, moving slowly around the living room, methodically checking each potential hiding spot. You live such a solitary life, Sarah. The voice continued conversationally, as if they were old friends catching up. No one visits you here. No one would notice if you disappeared for days, would they? The casual cruelty of the statement made Sarah's blood run cold, because she knew it was true. Her closest friends lived hours away, and she often went days without speaking to anyone, except via email or text. Her parents were traveling in Europe and wouldn't expect to hear from her for at least another week. The freelance nature of her work meant she had no colleagues who would raise the alarm if she failed to show up at an office. The isolation that had once felt like a blessing now revealed itself to be her greatest vulnerability. Sarah knew she needed to act, needed to do something before the intruder discovered her hiding place. The armchair concealed her from view if the person remained in the center of the room, but it wouldn't take much searching for them to find her. With trembling fingers, Sarah finally pressed the emergency call button on her phone, holding it close to her face to minimize any light it might emit. As the call connected, she could hear the dispatcher's voice, tiny and far away, despite the phone being pressed against her ear. 911, what's your emergency? Sarah didn't dare speak, couldn't risk making a sound, but she hoped that the open line would at least record what was happening, would capture the intruder's voice as evidence if she couldn't complete the thought, couldn't allow herself to consider the worst possibilities of her situation. The footsteps had stopped again, and Sarah realized with horror that they had paused directly on the other side of the armchair, just inches away from where she was crouched. She could hear breathing now, slow and steady, so close that she could almost feel it on the back of her neck. Found you, the voice whispered, and Sarah felt a hand close around her upper arm, gripping with surprising strength as she was pulled roughly to her feet. The phone clattered to the floor as Sarah found herself face to face with her intruder, the moonlight now streaming through the windows, providing just enough illumination to make out their features. What she saw made no sense, couldn't possibly be real, and yet there was no denying the evidence before her eyes. Sarah stared in frozen terror at a face identical to her own, a perfect mirror image down to the smallest detail, except for the eyes. The eyes were wrong, empty, devoid of any humanity or emotion, like looking into the eyes of a doll or a mannequin. What are you? Sarah managed to gasp, her voice barely audible, even to her own ears. The thing wearing her face tilted its head slightly, regarding her with something like curiosity. I am you, it replied simply, as if this were the most obvious answer in the world. Or rather, I will be you, once I no longer need this. It gestured vaguely toward its body, Sarah's body, a motion that somehow conveyed profound disgust. Your life is perfect for what I need, isolated, independent, minimal social connections. No one will notice the small differences as I adjust. Sarah's mind reeled, unable to fully process what she was hearing, what she was seeing. This couldn't be happening. Couldn't be real. She must have fallen asleep at her desk. Must be having some bizarre, stress-induced nightmare. And yet, the grip on her arm felt real enough. Painful even. The nails digging into her skin hard enough to leave marks. "Please," Sarah whispered, not even sure what she was pleading for. "Please don't do this." The thing wearing her face smiled, a grotesque parody of Sarah's own smile that never reached those dead, empty eyes. "It's already done," it said softly. "I've been practicing being you for weeks now, watching how you move, how you speak. I've been in your house while you slept, trying on your clothes, using your things. I even responded to a few emails as you, and no one noticed the difference. You've made this so easy for me, Sarah." As it spoke, it began to pull Sarah toward the kitchen, its strength far greater than her own, despite their identical physical appearances. Sarah struggled against its grip, her mind racing desperately for a way out of this impossible situation. The kitchen was dimly lit by the digital clock on the microwave, casting everything in an eerie green glow. Sarah noticed that several drawers had indeed been opened, their contents disturbed. On the countertop lay various items that had been removed and examined: her keys, her wallet, some mail, all the small personal artifacts that made up the documentation of her life. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked, her voice stronger now as anger began to mix with her fear. "What do you want?" The creature, for Sarah could no longer think of it as human despite its appearance, seemed to consider the question carefully before responding. "Want? I don't want anything from you specifically, Sarah. You're simply convenient, a suitable vessel, in the right place, at the right time. As for why, well, that's a much longer conversation than we have time for." It released its grip on Sarah's arm, only to grab her by the throat in one swift motion, pushing her back against the refrigerator with enough force to knock the wind from her lungs. "I had hoped to do this while you were sleeping," it said, almost apologetically. "It would have been easier for both of us. But I can adapt. I always adapt." As Sarah struggled to breathe, clawing frantically at the hand around her throat, the creature leaned in closer, its face just inches from her own, those dead eyes staring unblinkingly into hers. "Don't worry," it whispered. "This won't take long, and then I'll take good care of your life. No one will ever know you're gone. Isn't that what everyone wants in the end? To be remembered? To continue existing in some form?" Sarah's vision began to blur at the edges as oxygen deprivation set in, her struggles growing weaker by the second. In a last desperate attempt, she brought her knee up sharply, connecting with the creature's midsection. To her surprise, it reacted with very human pain, loosening its grip just enough for Sarah to slip free, gasping for air as she stumbled away. Without hesitation, Sarah lunged for the knife block on the counter, pulling out the largest blade just as the creature recovered and moved toward her again. "Stay back," Sarah warned, brandishing the knife with shaking hands. "Just stay away from me." The creature paused, regarding the knife with what appeared to be genuine concern, another strangely human reaction that seemed at odds with its claimed nature. "You're only delaying the inevitable," it said, though it maintained its distance, eyeing the knife warily. "There's nowhere for you to go, no one coming to help you. We both know how this ends." Sarah edged sideways, keeping the knife pointed at the creature as she moved toward the back door. If she could just get outside, maybe she could make it to her car, or into the woods where she could hide until daylight. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And you're not going to follow me. If you do, I swear I'll use this." The creature laughed, a perfect imitation of Sarah's own laugh that sent shivers down her spine. "And go where? To the neighbors? The police? And tell them what exactly? That someone who looks exactly like you tried to take over your life? How do you think that will sound? Sarah knew it was right, knew how insane her story would sound to anyone she told. Even if she managed to escape the immediate danger, who would believe what had happened here tonight? Who would accept that some creature had been studying her, planning to replace her, to become her? It was too fantastic, too impossible to be credible. And yet, the alternative was unthinkable. To simply give up. To allow this thing to take her place in the world, while she, what? Ceased to exist? The thought galvanized her, pushing back the paralysis of fear. "Maybe no one will believe me," she admitted, "but I'm not going to make this easy for you. I'm not just going to surrender my life." The creature tilted its head again, studying her, with what almost looked like respect. "Interesting," it murmured. "Most give up much sooner. But then, that's why I chose you, Sarah. That resilience, that determination, those are qualities worth preserving." It took a step closer, and Sarah raised the knife higher, causing it to pause again. "We seem to be at an impasse," it observed. "You won't surrender, and I can't afford to be injured. This form is still new, still fragile in some ways. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement." Sarah frowned, suspicious of this sudden shift in approach. "What kind of arrangement?" she asked cautiously, not lowering the knife even slightly. "A coexistence of sorts," the creature suggested, spreading its hands in a gesture of openness that looked unnervingly natural. "I need a life, an identity, but perhaps I don't need all of yours. We could share, in a manner of speaking. You could keep your name, your history, and I could simply accompany you, learn from you more directly. It would be less disruptive for both of us." Sarah stared in disbelief, unable to fathom what exactly the creature was proposing. "You want to, what? Be my roommate? My twin?" The creature smiled again, and this time the expression seemed almost genuine, reaching those empty eyes just enough to create the illusion of humanity. "Something like that, yes. A companion, a shadow that sometimes steps into the light. No one would need to know. There are two of us. We could take turns experiencing the world." Sarah knew she should refuse immediately, knew that any deal with this thing could only end badly for her. And yet, the alternative seemed to be a fight to the death, right here in her kitchen. A fight she wasn't certain she could win despite the weapon in her hand. How would that even work, she asked, buying time as she considered her options. How could we possibly share one life without anyone noticing? The creature seemed pleased by the question, taking it as a sign that Sarah was at least considering the proposal. "We're already so similar in appearance," it pointed out, "and I've studied you thoroughly. The differences would be minimal, easily explained away as mood changes or new interests. You would have companionship in your isolation, and I would have what I need without having to dispose of you. The casual way it referenced her potential murder sent another chill through Sarah, reminding her of the true nature of the thing she was negotiating with. This wasn't a person, wasn't bound by human morality or concerns. Whatever it was, it had been prepared to kill her without hesitation just moments ago, and might still do so if it decided the conversation was no longer productive. And if I refuse? Sarah asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it spoken aloud. The creature's expression hardened, the brief illusion of humanity falling away to reveal something ancient and cold beneath the familiar features. Then we return to the original plan. It said simply, "One of us leaves this house as Sarah, and it won't be you." Sarah's mind raced, searching desperately for a solution, a way out of this impossible situation. She couldn't accept this arrangement, couldn't allow this thing to share her life, to take over pieces of her existence at its whim. But neither could she see a clear path to escape or victory in a direct confrontation. The creature was stronger than it appeared. And while the knife gave her some advantage, she had no illusions about her ability to use it effectively if attacked again. As if sensing her indecision, the creature took another step forward, and this time Sarah didn't raise the knife higher. "You don't really have a choice, Sarah," it said softly, almost kindly. "But I'm offering you something few others in your position have been given. A chance to continue existing, to retain at least part of your identity." Sarah looked into those empty eyes, searching for any hint of deceit, any clue as to the creature's true intentions. What she saw there was not reassuring, not human, but there was intelligence, calculation, a weighing of options and outcomes that suggested it was being truthful about its offer. If only because killing her had become more complicated than anticipated. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Sarah asked, lowering the knife slightly. "How do I know this isn't just a trick to get me to drop my guard?" The creature smiled again, that unsettling, almost human expression. "You don't," it admitted freely. "You can't know. But what alternative do you have? We could fight, and maybe you'd win, though I doubt it. Or maybe we'd both be injured, leaving neither of us in a position to maintain this life you've built. Or you can accept my offer, and we can both get something of what we want." Sarah considered her options one last time, knowing that whatever decision she made in the next few moments would irrevocably change her life, if she even had a life after tonight. The knife felt heavy in her hand, a burden as much as a protection. Could she really use it, if necessary? Could she drive it into what looked exactly like her own body, her own face? And if she did, what then? How would she explain a dead duplicate of herself to the authorities? The creature was right about one thing. There was no scenario in which she simply returned to her normal life after tonight, no way to unsee what she had seen or unknow what she now knew about the world and what existed within it. Whatever her life had been before, it was over now, transformed by this encounter into something new and terrifying. "All right," Sarah said finally, the word tasting like defeat in her mouth. "All right, we'll try it your way. For now. But I need rules. boundaries. This is still my life. The creature's expression brightened with what looked almost like genuine pleasure, an emotion that seemed out of place on features that had been so coldly threatening just moments before. Of course, it agreed readily. Boundaries are important. We can negotiate the specifics, decide how to share this life in a way that works for both of us. It extended a hand toward Sarah, the gesture so normal, so human, that it was jarring in its incongruity with the situation. "Partners?" it asked, and Sarah noticed that its voice had shifted subtly, becoming even more identical to her own, as if it were already practicing, already becoming more fully her. With profound reluctance, Sarah transferred the knife to her left hand and reached out with her right, clasping the creature's offered hand. Its skin felt exactly like her own, warm and soft, indistinguishable from human. "Partners," she agreed, the word hollow and false in her ears. "For now." As their hands met, the creature smiled once more, and this time the expression reached its eyes fully, transforming them from empty voids to perfect replicas of Sarah's own. The change was subtle, but unmistakable, and somehow more terrifying than anything that had come before, because in that moment, Sarah realized that whatever this thing was, it was becoming more like her by the second, absorbing her mannerisms, her expressions, her very essence simply through contact. And she understood with sudden, awful clarity that there would be no sharing, no coexistence, no partnership. The agreement was simply another strategy, another approach to achieving what it had wanted all along. It didn't need to kill her physically when it could simply erase her piece by piece, absorbing what made her who she was until there was nothing left of the original Sarah, only the perfect copy standing in her place. As this realization dawned, Sarah saw the knowing look in the creature's now perfect eyes, saw that it was aware that she had understood the truth. "Don't worry," it said softly, still holding her hand in what had become less a handshake and more a gesture of possession. "It won't hurt. You'll just fade, like falling asleep, and I'll take good care of everything you care about. I promise. After all, they'll be the things I care about too." Sarah wanted to pull away, wanted to raise the knife again, wanted to run, but found herself unable to move, frozen in place as something cold and alien flowed from the creature's hand into hers, spreading slowly up her arm and toward her heart.